I'm Gabriel, and this is The Rare Mind. Today we'll walk through Joseph Campbell's hero stages, and you'll see how INFJs and INTJs quietly live this path in their own isolation. Stay with me until the end, because we'll uncover how their solitude doesn't just heal them, but transforms into a gift they carry back to the world. Joseph Campbell described the call to adventure as life's summons toward purpose, a push that disturbs ordinary patterns and forces the hero to step into the unknown. For most people, this call is subtle, often drowned out by obligations, distractions, and comfort. But for INFJs and INTJs, the call arrives like an ache that refuses to fade, an interior restlessness that ordinary life cannot soothe. It is not merely external events that summon them, but an inner voice, a pressure within the soul. The INFJ hears this call in the register of meaning. It emerges as a whisper insisting that there must be more than repetition and performance. Work, relationships, and even moments of beauty begin to feel hollow if not anchored in deeper truth. Their heart aches not because life is empty, but because they sense a hidden depth beneath appearances, waiting to be pursued. For the INTJ, the call takes another form. It is less whisper than vision, a sudden recognition of what could exist but does not yet. They feel pulled toward building something lasting, an architecture of the future that only they can see. I have lived both, the longing for meaning and the hunger to create, yet the call to adventure rarely feels convenient. Both INFJs and INTJs are tempted to resist, not out of indifference but out of fear or duty. The INFJ worries that following this summons may rupture relationships or disappoint expectations. Their loyalty to others makes the leap seem like betrayal. The INTJ hesitates when resources appear insufficient or timing feels premature. Vision without means feels like failure waiting to happen. Resistance, then, is not weakness, but the honest recognition of cost. Haven't you felt that tug knowing you must go, yet fearing what leaving will demand? Still, the ache cannot be silenced. The INFJ lies awake sensing they are not living at full depth. The INTJ, even while succeeding in visible terms, feels restless, driven by an unfinished blueprint. Ordinary life begins to feel like exile from the true path. They may appear functional, but inside, they know something is missing. Sometimes the restlessness is almost unbearable, like a melody half remembered but never resolved. This first stage validates that very restlessness. It is not neurosis or ingratitude, but the sign of a deeper summons. The call to adventure names what INFJs and INTJs often cannot explain: the urge to step beyond security into purpose. To ignore it is to wither. To answer it is to awaken. The harsh truth is that comfort will never be enough for them. Their destiny begins in that disquiet, the sacred ache that drives them away from the familiar and into the unknown. And I, too, have learned that the voice within does not stop calling until it is obeyed. Every hero, Campbell reminds us, first resists. The summons toward destiny is not met with immediate courage, but with hesitation, bargaining, and delay. For INFJs and INTJs, this refusal often cuts deeper because they are painfully aware of the cost. To walk the path of purpose means to risk misunderstanding, isolation, and failure. The refusal is less about indifference and more about self-preservation. For the INFJ, resistance takes the form of relational fear. Their compass points toward meaning, yet they hesitate, worried that pursuing truth will fracture bonds or disappoint those they love. They imagine themselves as disruptors, breakers of harmony, and so they delay. The burden of empathy becomes a chain. I know this hesitation in my own life, choosing silence rather than risk the weight of letting someone down. For the INTJ, refusal emerges through calculation. They see the mountain of resources required, the fragile timing, the gaps in skill, and they wait. The vision is alive, but execution feels premature. Their hesitation is logical, but it can mask fear, the fear that perhaps the vision will collapse once tested. To build too early is to risk ruin, so they hold back, hoping for a safer moment that never comes. Kierkegaard named this paralysis despair, the ache of knowing there is a leap to take, yet remaining frozen before it. It is despair not because they lack faith, but because they remain divided within themselves. The INFJ feels the split between empathy and authenticity. The INTJ feels the split between vision and capacity. To refuse is to live in fragments. Recognizing this stage matters. The refusal is not failure. It is part of the passage. To name hesitation is to weaken its grip. For the INFJ, awareness allows them to see that protecting others at the cost of truth helps no one. For the INTJ, awareness unmasks perfectionism as fear. Disguised as strategy, resistance loses power once exposed. The truth is stark. To stay in refusal is to live half alive, restless yet unmoving. But once acknowledged, hesitation itself becomes fuel. The very doubts that once chained them can sharpen their resolve. And so the hero must decide cling to safety or leap into the uncertainty that alone can fulfill the call. Sometimes to remain is the greater danger. No hero crosses the threshold alone. Campbell describes the mentor as the figure who appears at the edge of hesitation, offering not completion of the journey but courage to begin. For INFJs and INTJs, the mentor stage often takes unexpected forms. Their lives are too inward, too unconventional, for guidance to arrive only through traditional teachers. Instead, wisdom often slips in through symbols, texts, or solitary encounters that alter their course. I want to hear from you. Which stage do you feel you're standing in right now? Is it the refusal, still hesitating? Or maybe the tests where everything feels like resistance? Drop it in the comments, because naming your stage can be the first step in moving forward. For the INFJ, the mentor is often found in living souls who carry depth, a professor who sees beneath the surface, a friend whose words pierce with clarity, or even a stranger whose presence radiates authenticity. Just as often, guidance arrives through symbolic material, a novel that mirrors their inner conflict, a poem that names the ache they could not articulate. I recall nights when a single line on a page felt like someone reaching through time to place a hand on my shoulder. For the INTJ, mentors are often less personal and more systemic. They find inspiration in frameworks, in the writings of thinkers and strategists who seem to blueprint reality itself. Historical figures, philosophers, architects of vision, these become their invisible teachers. What they seek in mentorship is not emotional validation but confirmation that their method, their hunger for structure, has precedent. Sometimes even a fragment of theory becomes a companion stronger than a crowd. The mentor serves one purpose above all: to remind the INFJ and INTJ that their path, though lonely, is not solitary. Others have walked into the unknown before them, bearing the same weight of misunderstanding, the same ache of vision. This recognition reframes isolation not as exile but as preparation. Isn't it a strange comfort that even in solitude, one can find lineage? Meeting the mentor does not erase fear, but it pierces despair. It offers a lantern at the threshold, enough light for the next step. For INFJ and INTJ alike, the mentor stage whispers a vital truth. The path you fear is not madness. It is initiation. And though no one can walk it for you, you do not walk it alone. There comes a moment when hesitation can no longer hold. Campbell names it the crossing of the threshold, the step away from the known world into the uncertainty of the unknown. For INFJs and INTJs, this moment is often quiet, even invisible to others, but inside it feels seismic. It is the point where inner conviction outweighs outer fear, and the leap is taken with trembling certainty. For the INFJ, this threshold is often relational. They choose to detach from dynamics that suffocate their authenticity, friendships built on pretense, environments that demand they mute their depth. The act may appear small, like leaving a room or declining an invitation, but within it is a symbolic crossing, the courage to choose selfhood over conformity. I remember closing a door once, not in anger but in quiet finality, knowing that silence was my entry into truth. For the INTJ, the threshold is often strategic. They abandon security in order to pursue a vision no one else yet sees. It may mean leaving a stable path for an untested project, or refusing the safety of consensus in favor of solitary construction. The leap feels dangerous precisely because it burns bridges behind them. Efficiency demands sacrifice, and they do not look back once the step is made. Crossing this boundary requires a paradoxical courage, acting before certainty. Both INFJ and INTJ must discover that clarity does not come first, it follows movement. Waiting until fear is gone ensures paralysis. Only stepping into the unknown generates the strength to continue. Isn't it strange how often the doorway is invisible until you walk through it? This crossing is not triumph, but initiation. It does not grant reward, but strips comfort away. Yet, in that stripping, both INFJ and INTJ discover the deep truth. They are capable of walking without the crowd, of risking without assurance. And that first act of courage, however fragile, reshapes the entire path ahead. Once the threshold is crossed, the path does not smooth. Campbell reminds us that the hero encounters trials, tests of character, betrayals, unexpected allies, and enemies that mirror inner shadows. For INFJs and INTJs, these encounters do not merely happen out there in the external world. They pierce their interior life, demanding not only endurance but self-revelation. For the INFJ, tests often come in the form of emotional weight. They may experience betrayal from those they trusted, silence from those they poured themselves into, or the loneliness of giving without reciprocity. Each wound forces them to refine compassion into discernment. Their challenge is not to lose their empathy, but to sharpen it with boundaries. I have lived this tension, how easily kindness can turn to depletion when misused. When I describe that restless pull of the call to adventure, that inner voice INFJs hear, or that future vision INTJs feel, did something inside you say, "Yes, that's me"? If it did, hit like now. That way I know this journey matters to you, and I'll keep bringing reflections that validate what most people can't name. For the INTJ, tests arrive through the collapse of plans. Strategies fail, timing unravels, or opposition grows stronger than expected. What seemed flawless in theory must face the friction of reality. These failures are not punishments but crucibles, demanding resilience and adaptation. The INTJ's temptation is to withdraw into perfectionism or cynicism, yet the real test is to remain flexible without betraying vision. Allies, though rare, appear as kindred souls, those who, by some mystery, recognize their depth or share their hunger for clarity. For INFJs, such allies often emerge in relationships that feel like soul mirrors. For INTJs, they appear in collaborators who match their precision and endurance. These bonds, though few, carry disproportionate power. They remind both types that their journey, while solitary, is not condemned to absolute isolation. Enemies often echo their shadows. The INFJ may face manipulators who exploit empathy, an external image of their own fear of self-erasure. The INTJ may encounter rigid opponents who reflect their own temptation toward control. The battle is less about conquering others than confronting themselves. These trials carve resilience. They reveal what is fragile, what is enduring, and what must evolve. The INFJ learns that love without discernment destroys. The INTJ learns that vision without humility collapses. Tests, allies, and enemies together sculpt the rare strength that neither type could discover in comfort. Every blow endured, every betrayal absorbed, every friendship kindled becomes part of their hidden arsenal. And though unseen by the crowd, this arsenal is what enables them to face the abyss to come. Every true journey arrives at a breaking point. Campbell calls it the abyss, the place where the hero faces near destruction, stripped of certainty, stripped even of self. For INFJs and INTJs, this descent is not merely symbolic. It is an interior collapse where their greatest strengths become unbearable weights. To survive the abyss is to be remade. For the INFJ, the abyss often manifests as emotional implosion. Their empathy, once gift, now floods them with so much pain they cannot breathe. They feel consumed by others' needs, invisible in their own. In this collapse, the sanctuary of solitude can feel less like refuge and more like exile. I know this dark silence, the nights when every word of comfort I had given others echoed back as emptiness within me. For the INTJ, the abyss comes as the shattering of vision. The carefully drawn blueprint fails, the fortress cracks. A plan that defined their purpose unravels, leaving them face to face with futility. To invest everything into a future that suddenly disintegrates feels like annihilation. Their danger is despair disguised as stoic withdrawal. Behind the wall of control, they are bleeding. Kierkegaard insisted that such confrontation with despair is unavoidable. The abyss is not punishment, it is initiation. To remain at the surface is to remain half-formed. Only in descent does the individual encounter the raw truth of existence, fragility, failure, mortality. The INFJ must face the collapse of their own identity dissolved in others. The INTJ must face the collapse of control itself, and yet, survival transforms them. Passing through the abyss does not return them to who they were before. It leaves them unshakably altered. What once seemed unbearable becomes the very ground of strength. The INFJ learns to feel without disappearing. The INTJ learns to build again without illusion of invulnerability. The abyss is terror, yes, but it is also the furnace of rebirth. To endure it is to discover that even when everything breaks, something indestructible remains. And that indestructible core becomes the seed of the transformation that follows. The abyss does not leave the INFJ or INTJ unchanged. From the depths, a light appears, not the light of return to old certainties, but the light of new vision. Campbell describes this as revelation, the stage where suffering becomes insight and collapse becomes the very ground of transformation. For the INFJ, the revelation often comes as a new understanding of suffering itself. Pain is no longer seen as senseless weight but as a portal into meaning. They discover that empathy is not about absorption but about transfiguration, turning wounds into wisdom, silence into sanctuary for others. I have felt this shift myself, when grief that once hollowed me began to carry a strange radiance as though it had been teaching me all along. For the INTJ, revelation arrives in the ruins of failure. The shattering of their strategy forces them to confront a truth deeper than efficiency. Control is not mastery, and vision matures through revision. What once felt like collapse is revealed as blueprint. Their failure becomes instruction, their loss a hidden map. They rise not weaker, but sharper, more adaptive, more precise. This stage makes clear that transformation is not about acquiring power but about shifting perspective. The INFJ no longer fears drowning in empathy, for they now know how to stand within it. The INTJ no longer fears collapse, for they now know how to rebuild without illusion. Both have seen their limits and discovered they are not annihilation but thresholds. The treasure of revelation is hidden not in triumph but in clarity. This is what they carry back from the abyss, an inner solidity that no applause, no external validation can replace. Their scars are not defects, they are inscriptions, and from them emerges a rare kind of authority, the authority of one who has died to illusion and risen with truth. Notice how, when we reach the abyss, that collapse under empathy for INFJs or shattered vision for INTJs, it's not the end, it's the turning point. If you want to keep exploring these hidden stages of transformation, subscribe. Each week I map another layer of this rare journey so you don't have to piece it together alone. In that moment of transformation, The INFJ and INTJ step into their hidden power. They do not become untouchable, they become uncheckable. After revelation, the hero cannot simply continue unchanged. Campbell names this stage atonement, the reconciliation of self with destiny, the integration of what was divided. For INFJs and INTJs, this means healing the fractures within, the split between empathy and boundaries, between vision and humility. Without alignment, their transformation remains incomplete. For the INFJ, atonement begins with compassion that no longer erases the self. They learn that to serve others authentically, they must also guard their own soul. The martyrdom that once tempted them is replaced by a wiser love-compassion anchored in truth. I have felt this shift within me, the moment when saying no became not rejection but fidelity to my deeper yes. For the INTJ, atonement emerges as vision tempered by humility. The abyss has taught them that no system is invulnerable, no design eternal. There, strength remains in strategy, but now softened by awareness of contingency. What once was rigid ambition becomes disciplined stewardship. They still see farther than most, but they no longer mistake themselves for gods of the future. Campbell described atonement as the union of mortal and divine, the human reconciled to something greater. In the INFJ, this union takes the shape of empathy rooted in clarity. In the INTJ, it takes the shape of power disciplined by perspective. Neither needs to be split anymore. Alignment is the quiet revolution. The INFJ no longer dissolves into others, the INTJ no longer hides behind control. Both move forward whole, their inner contradictions no longer enemies but integrated strengths. Isn't it strange that the deepest harmony is born only after fracture? From this union, their path no longer feels divided. They can walk with steadiness, aware of fragility but no longer defined by it. Their atonement is not perfection. It is integrity. And in integrity, their destiny takes form. Campbell insists the journey does not end with transformation and solitude. The hero must return, bearing what they have gained, offering it back to the world. For INFJs and INTJs, this stage is both the hardest and the most necessary. After all their isolation, their instinct is to guard the treasure. Yet the path demands return. The gift is never meant for the self alone. For the INFJ, the elixir often takes the form of perspective, a healing way of seeing. That restores meaning where others have lost it. They return from silence with insights that soothe despair, with empathy purified into wisdom. Their words, gestures, and even their presence carry depth distilled in solitude. I have seen how even a single sentence, born of inner wrestling, can shift the atmosphere in a room. Next time, we'll dig into how INFJs and INTJs can avoid getting trapped in the abyss and instead use it as the very fire that forges purpose. If you want to catch that as soon as it drops, turn on notifications. That way you won't miss the next piece of your own hero's path. For the INTJ, the elixir appears as structure. They bring back blueprints, strategies, and frameworks shaped in the crucible of solitude. Where others drift in uncertainty, they anchor possibility into form. Their contribution is not sentimental, it is architectural. They build what others could not imagine, and through that building, they offer stability and direction. Yet the return is fraught with risk. The world may not welcome the gift. It may ignore the wisdom of the INFJ or resist the structures of the INTJ. Campbell reminds us, the elixir is not validated by applause but by integrity. The task is to offer, not to control reception. The true elixir is not the artifact itself, but the transformation carried in their being. The INFJ no longer loses themselves in compassion. The INTJ no longer hides behind control. Both embody what they have learned, and that embodiment is the treasure. Thus, their solitude ripens into contribution. What once looked like exile now reveals itself as preparation. By returning with the elixir, INFJ and INTJ turn isolation into gift, making their private journey a quiet offering for collective growth. Isn't this the paradox that the ones most accused of withdrawal often return carrying what the world secretly craves? The hero's path does not end with return. It continues in cycles. Campbell taught that once the elixir is brought back, a new call eventually emerges. For INFJs and INTJs, this means that their lives are not defined by one grand transformation, but by recurring seasons of withdrawal, confrontation, revelation, and return. To live as a rare hero is to embrace this rhythm without apology. For the INFJ, this embodiment means carrying compassion that is no longer fragile, but anchored in truth. Their empathy becomes not absorption but clarity, a way of seeing into others without losing themselves. They live as quiet healers, not by avoiding wounds but by transmuting them. I have known this in my own body, the way scars can become symbols, reminders of strength hidden within fragility. For the INTJ, heroism takes shape as disciplined vision. Their focus sharpens into purpose, their architecture into legacy. They are no longer seduced by the illusion of control, but neither do they abandon their responsibility to build. They live as architects of futures, willing to endure solitude for the sake of what outlasts them. Their heroism is not loud, it is unrelenting. To live as hero is to understand that the cycle is never finished. New calls will come, new abysses will break them open, new revelations will demand alignment. Each return prepares them for the next descent. The INFJ and INTJ must accept that their rare path is not a linear achievement, but a spiral of deepening. Campbell's framework gives language to what they often feel wordless within themselves, that their solitude, their suffering, and their vision are not private accidents but universal archetypes. The resonance of their journey lies in its humanity. They are rare not because they are separate from the world, but because they embody what is most deeply true about it. As we talk about the return with the elixir, the moment when depth or vision must be shared, think of someone you know who's been isolating, maybe misunderstood. Share this video with them. It could help them see that what feels like exile is actually part of a bigger heroic cycle. To live as a rare hero, then, is not to escape the cycle, but to embrace it fully. To answer the call again and again, each time more integrated, each time more awake. And so the INFJ and INTJ stand as quiet testaments that even isolation, when embraced as passage, can become destiny lived in full.